Hello guys, welcome back to Anime Moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Against the Gods based on novel. So let's start explanation. The moment Feng Shichen's words fell, the atmosphere in the Great Hall instantly froze. Tense gazes focused on Yunche one after another. Truthfully, no one felt it was strange that Feng Shichen would suddenly target Yunche. Because in the ranking tournament 2 years ago, Yunche had exposed his Phoenix's flames. And only people who were attached to the Divine Phoenix sect and possessed the Phoenix's bloodline were capable of wielding Phoenix flames. The Phoenix's bloodline was where the Divine Phoenix sect soul was located, and it was also something the entire sect would unhesitantly exhaust everything to protect. They would definitely not allow this soul and bloodline be leaked outside. Hence, unless Yunche was a genuine disciple of the Divine Phoenix sect, the moment the news of him possessing the Phoenix's bloodline spread, the Divine Phoenix sect would definitely come knocking on his doorstep one day. And this day had finally come. And the person who came, impressively, was even the Prince of the Divine Phoenix Empire, the Divine Phoenix sect's young masterclass figure. When he was facing Yunche, his words were even straight to the point, immediately referring to the word bloodline. Xia Qingyue's snow-like face turned slightly solemn, Chu Yueli's arched brows heavily sank as well. Kang Wanha's expression was even more so, changing constantly. However, regarding the Divine Phoenix sect's bloodline, even if he was the Blue Wind Emperor, he had absolutely no right to speak up. He could only look towards Yunche, with a gaze carrying deep worry. Currently, he could only wish that Yunche's Phoenix's bloodline was just a misunderstanding. After all, although outsiders had spread that the flames Yunche used were Phoenix's flames, Yunche had never admitted it, and it might just be similar. Yunche's expression, however, was incomparably calm. With a flat tone, he said, "Oh? A grave matter related to your sect's bloodline? That's something I can't understand. Yunche grew up in Blue Wind Empire's soil, my bloodline comes from my parents, and they had never left the Blue Wind Empire in their life, nor had they taken even half a step into the Divine Phoenix Empire. How could I even have the slightest relationship to your Divine Phoenix sect's bloodline? Junior, cut with your pretense." The black-clothed elder behind Feng Shichen took a step forward, saying with a stern tone, "My Divine Phoenix sect's bloodline is incomparably valuable. Ever since the creation of the sect, protecting our Phoenix's bloodline had always been our sect's #1 priority, and we would definitely not allow the slightest bit of our bloodline to be leaked outside. Even if the people of sect were to marry with an outsider, their future generations would have to forever stay in the Phoenix Divine sect as well. We never allowed the slightest bit of compromise when it comes to matters regarding our bloodline. As for you, at the ranking tournament in Blue Wind Empire 2 years ago, everyone present had all personally witnessed you using Phoenix flames. And only by possessing the Phoenix's bloodline can one light up the flames of the Phoenix. Your body clearly carries the Phoenix's bloodline. It can be assumed that you should be a bastard child left outside by an extremely audacious disciple from the sect." "That's right." The red-clothed elder slowly nodded, his gaze was like a hook. "If it's not because you possessed our Divine Phoenix sect's bloodline, how could a small little practitioner like you who grew up in Blue Wind without any background from any sect, possess the shocking, overbearing talent to suppress all of the Blue Wind's youths in the ranking tournament? HMPH, for you to be able to acquire your achievements till this day, the Phoenix's bloodline that your body carries is the best explanation. In front of the God-sent strength of the Divine Phoenix, the other so-called sect's lineage, or 1-in-100-year geniuses, are basically incomparable to even dog's shit. For you to be capable of acquiring the top position of this Blue Wind Empire's ranking tournament is truly perfectly normal." Although the two's words were blurted out, they incomparably clearly projected overbearing arrogance, and their contempt and disdain towards the Blue Wind practitioners. Anger instantly rose in the hearts of several practitioners present, however, they dared to be furious, yet they did not dare to speak up. Because putting their feelings aside, their words were basically the truth. In front of the almighty strength of the Divine Phoenix sect, the entire profound practitioning world within the Blue Wind Empire was basically not worth mentioning at all. Not just that, several people present had always suspected whether the reason why Yunche's talent was so shocking was because he possessed the Divine Phoenix sect's Phoenix bloodline. Feng Shichen's eyes lightly blinked. Waving his jade fan lightly, he leisurely said, "All right now, you two do not need to be so impatient. It's the wedding of the Blue Wind Emperor's daughter today. If everyone were to be disturbed because of this, then we will be the ones in the wrong. Yunche, I believe you definitely understand what we're trying to bring across. The matter of whether your body possesses the Phoenix's bloodline is extremely important to my Divine Phoenix sect, hence, this prince requires a little bit of your blood. Once your blood is in this prince's hands, whether you possess the Phoenix's bloodline will be clear at a glance. Then, are you prepared to draw your blood yourself, or do you want this prince to help you release some blood?" The Great Hall's atmosphere instantly became even more oppressed. Kang Wanhe took a step forward, opened his mouth, but he was unable to let out a single sound. In the huge matter regarding the Divine Phoenix sect's bloodline, he had no right to speak up at all. The corner of Yunche's lips moved, smiling lightly. "My skin and hair were given by my parents, the ones with the rights to take my blood, only my loved ones. The two of us are neither friend nor foe, and we're far from being familiar with each other, so what rights do you have to ask of me to give my blood to you?" The moment these words fell, everyone was surprised in their hearts. After the Burning Heaven clan was exterminated, Yunche's tyrannical and overbearing ways was rooted deeply in everyone's hearts. However, no one had expected that when Yunche was facing the Prince of the Divine Phoenix sect, his manner of speaking would actually be as unyielding as before. Forget about being humble, he was not even the least bit courteous. "Insolence! Lowly Junior, you actually dare to be arrogant in front of His Highness." The black-cloaked elder exploded with fury. "Your Highness, with your noble status, you basically do need to waste your words with such a lowly bastard child. It's fine to simply allow me to seize him directly, and release his blood. If your Highness thinks it's too troublesome, HMPH, killing a bastard child like this, is fine as well. There's no need to even test him." "A lowly bastard child?" Yunche's brows instantly sank, a killing intent that was cold to the extreme flashed past in the depths of his eyes. These three words not only humiliated him, but his parents and relatives as well. Ha 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 ha. Feng Shichen was not even the least bit angry, rather, he raised his head and began to laugh out loud. "Yunche, ever since the first day this prince stepped onto the soil of the Blue Wind Empire, I have heard of your heaven-defying arrogance. After seeing it firsthand today, it's really not even the least bit untrue. But this prince fancies people like you, because an arrogant idiot like you who doesn't know the difference between heaven and earth, is always able to give this prince some joyous moments. If this world lacks idiots like you, this prince's life will really be devoid of too much joy. The two of you, stand back. Today, this prince shall personally play with his blood." Snap! The jade fan in Feng Shichen's hands instantly opened up. Such a casual action actually brought about a sound wave as though space was being torn apart. The surrounding several wedding tables instantly crumbled by the terrifying profound energy, with various glass cups and jade plates scattering onto the ground. This was the Blue Wind Imperial Palace, and it was even the place where the princess's wedding was being hosted. In Blue Wind, even if one had a heavenly huge grudge, one would never dare to act rashly at such an occasion. Yet Feng Shichen dealt out his hand just as he had said. Evidently, he basically never placed this imperial palace in his eyes at all. And when this single blow of his was unleashed, the surrounding guests all paled from shock. Even those sect masterclass figures who possessed almighty strength, all had pale faces as well as they retreated out of fear. Because the formidable might released by Feng Shichen was impressively a throne's power. A throne was in existence at the ultimate summit of Blue Wind Empire, and the number of thrones in the Blue Wind Empire added up was even less than 10. But this prince, who was only around 20 years old, and was ranked 13th in the Divine Phoenix Imperial Palace, actually possessed a throne's power. The aura of the two elders he brought along also did not seem to be the least bit weaker than him either. Clearly, they were similarly genuine thrones as well. Kang Wanhe had absolutely never expected that Feng Shichen would actually act in the palace's wedding ceremony, as he loudly exclaimed, "13th Prince, please listen to us." When Kang Wanhe's words fell, Feng Shichen did not even care in the least. The jade fan in his hand suddenly flew out, spinning at extreme speed, it turned into a life-taking flying wheel, flying towards Yunche. Behind the flying wheel, a long thin black line trailed behind it. Shockingly, that was space being torn apart. And the place it was flying to was directed right at Yunche's throat. Clearly, he wanted to immediately splatter out blood in this wedding ceremony. "Watch out!" Ling Yun, Ling Jie, and Dong Fangxiu exclaimed. Facing this incoming jade fan with a life-taking aura, Yunche's brows tightened. He did not block it, rather, while turning his body, he rose with a leap. With a loud-sounding bang, he smashed through the great hall's roof and accelerated towards the south. "Heh? Trying to flee?" Feng Shichen smiled coldly. With a wave of his hand, the jade fan flew back into the palm of his hand. His blazing figure blurred, and when he broke through the door, it looked as though his body had teleported, as he chased towards the direction Yunche sped to. No one had ever expected that such a change would actually occur to this big wedding which the entire empire was focused on. The various experts of Blue Wind Empire looked at each other, their faces were pale, yet none of them dared to stop Feng Shichen, even though this was Blue Wind Empire's territory. What a joke. Even if they would end up offending Yunche, they definitely would not choose to offend the Divine Phoenix sect. Although their names and their sect's names may shake the Blue Wind Empire, in front of the Divine Phoenix sect, it was basically impossible for them to possess the least bit of strength to resist. Even if their rage had boiled all the way up to their brains, they would definitely not have the audacity to step into the matters of the Divine Phoenix sect. Inside the moon-embracing palace, Kang Yu, who had long finished dressing up, was quietly and anxiously sitting in front of the dressing mirror. Hiding under the lightly swaying glass tassels was her absolutely breathtaking beautiful face. Beside her, Xiao Lingxi had been accompanying her. Occasionally, she would speak with her, calming down the anxiousness in her heart. In another few short moments, Yunche would be coming to lead her by the hand, to worship to the heaven and earth with her, and become husband and wife. At this moment, an ear-shaking boom suddenly came from outside. After the loud boom, series of disorderly noises rang. The initial sounds of gongs and drums suddenly stopped abruptly, and what remained was only chaos. Although the moon-embracing palace was very far away from the big wedding hall, these sounds could still be heard clearly. "What's that sound?" Kang Yu spoke up anxiously. "What happened outside?" "I'll go take a look." Xiao Lingxi instantly became anxious as well, and she ran outside with quick steps. Yunche consecutively leapt into the air several times, speedily moving far away from the wedding hall. After landing on an empty land in the imperial palace, his steps suddenly stopped, while Feng Shichen seemed to have immediately landed behind him right after. His speed was really as quick as a ghost's. Seeing Yunche stop in his steps, he began to laugh in ridicule. "Come on, run, why aren't you running anymore? It's been a very long time since this prince has played hide-and-seek. At the very least, you should let this prince play his part." "Run?" Yunche revealed a cold smile. "You think I'm afraid of you? Today is the day of my wedding. I simply do not wish for your blood to dirty my wedding hall." Feng Shichen's expression did not change as haze gathered within his two eyes. Yunche's degree of arrogance was way above his expectations. Since he was young, this was actually the first time he had encountered someone who dared to speak to him in such a manner. The corner of his lips slowly raised, his laughter sounding even more dangerous. "My blood? Ha ha ha. You're really arrogant and idiotic to the point of being cute. Do you think that a mere someone like you have the right to see my blood? But from the looks of it, regarding this matter of bloodline, there's already no need to test it any longer. You're actually, very sincerely, courting your own death in front of this prince. Though, it's good to change to a more spacious location. By leaving that wedding hall or whatever intact, after this, it's even more convenient to change it into a spirit hall." "A spirit hall? For your own usage?" Yunche said with narrowed eyes. As a prince of Divine Phoenix Empire, when arriving at any nation, Feng Shichen would always be able to walk with a completely straight back. Seemingly, when anyone was in front of him, they would always be silent, and did not dare to have the slightest bit of disrespect or offensive behavior, even more so in the weakest Blue Wind Empire. However, his status as the Divine Phoenix Prince evidently did not instill any fear in Yunche, and this undoubtedly caused Feng Shichen's heart to sour greatly, and his intent to kill Yunche had completely been raised as well. He loftily gave a cold laugh. Yunche, this prince is really curious as to where you get that audacity and confidence to actually dare to display such arrogance in front of this prince. Do you really think that you're invincible, simply by being capable of exterminating Burning Heaven Clan, one of the so-called four major sects? Ha 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 ha. A frog in a well that has never walked out of this tiny nation is really funny and pitiful. Bluntly speaking, along the way, I have heard many rumors regarding you. Initially, I still had a bit of expectation for you, but I never thought that your profound strength is actually only at the earth-profound realm, which can't even be described as pitiful. It seems like these so-called four major sects are nothing more than the four biggest jokes. Feng Shichen calmly looked at Yunche. His eyes looked as though he was looking at a lowly and which did not even have the qualifications to be seen before him. But your fate is still pretty good, because you will die an honorable death in this prince's hands. Before you die, this prince will even be kind enough to allow a trash with a mixed bloodline like you witness what true phoenix flames look like. Feng Shichen's hand gesture changed, his fan opened up, and the scarlet flame mark on his forehead flashed, emitting out an eye-burning light. Instantly, crimson flames of the phoenix burst out as though a tornado was suddenly swept up, filling up the sky and blocking the sun in a blink of an eye. The air crazily expanded and surged, and a severe distortion appeared in everyone's line of sight. An extremely terrifying heatwave enveloped downwards, causing all of the people in the vicinity to look as though they were wrapped in blazing magma. Their breaths were completely held in, and their entire bodies felt as though they were about to burn up. Scree tilde tilde. Scree tilde. Clear and loud phoenix cries sounded from within the flames, trembling every single person to the point where even their souls were deeply shaken. The people raised their heads, and shockingly, they saw those crimson flames that filled the sky look as though they were formed and merged by countless freely soaring fire phoenixes which released a destructive might that could even burn the heavens and earth. The surrounding blue wind experts retreated out of fear. The blazing heat of these flames along with their might and depth had completely surpassed their understanding and imagination. Even Burning Heaven Clan's purple profound flames of the highest tier, in front of these crimson flames, could not even be compared, because these were Phoenix's flames that came from the Divine Phoenix sect. They possessed the might of a divine beast. They were the publicly acknowledged strongest flames of the entire profound sky continent. There were countless experts present, yet none of them had the confidence to go against flames like these. Also, even Dongfang Xiu, an ultimate expert at half-step into the Emperor Profound Realm, might even be killed instantly when facing these extremely terrifying flames. Looking at the phoenix's flames which enveloped the entire sky, the black-clothed elder and red-colored elder nodded slowly as well. The black-clothed elder sighed. Although His Highness's aptitude cannot be considered as the best among the many princes, he, after all, still carry the royal bloodline. In this year, the strength of his phoenix's flames had made considerable breakthroughs. Currently, he no longer seemed to be weaker than us old things. I believe, given another year, he will be able to completely surpass us. The red-clothed elder said. Ho ho, we are nothing but two little bodyguards in the sect. Our lifetime's limit is basically restricted to the Emperor Profound. How can we be used as comparison for His Highness? With His Highness's current progress, he might have a hope of becoming an overlord in his lifetime. The phoenix flames that filled the sky were like the flames of the purgatory. Carrying a boundless destructive aura, they enveloped downwards, towards Yunche. Looking at the descending flames, Yunche originally wanted to act, however, as though he suddenly thought of something, the pair of hands which he had raised were retracted, allowing the flames to descend and completely submerge him within. Boss! Yunche! The sea of flames that filled the sky completely engulfed Yunche, even causing his figure and aura to be completely swallowed within. Helplessly watching this entire scene, a series of panicked roars came from the vicinity. Ling Jie and Dongfang Xiu sprang out of the crowd. However, before they could even approach the phoenix flames, they were forced back by the searing heat of the flames that far surpassed their imagination. They were basically unable to approach at all. In their states of horror, they were basically unable to imagine how terrifying the outcome would be if they were engulfed by flames like these. Probably, in a mere instant, from their clothes, to their skin, to their flesh, and even their bones, they might all be burnt to ash. Ha 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 ha. Feng Shichen let out a cruel, wild laugh. So this is the number one of Blue Wind's ranking tournament? The number one of Blue Wind's younger generation? My teeth are really falling out from laughing here. This prince had thought that he might be able to struggle a little. Never did I expect that under the might of the phoenix flames, he actually wasn't even able to move, and was instantly swallowed whole. In this world, there's nothing that the flames of the phoenix cannot burn away. Under the phoenix's intense flames, in only 3 seconds, even his bones will turn into ash. Yunche, who was swallowed whole by the phoenix's flames, naturally did not receive any form of damage. Forget about Feng Shichen, even if his father, the current Divine Phoenix Sect Master, the Divine Phoenix Emperor, was here, he should not even think of using phoenix flames to harm a single strand of his hair. He stood within the flames unmoving, focusing his heart to feel the surging flames of the phoenix by his side. The flames of the phoenix indeed required the phoenix's bloodline to be ignited. The reason why he himself was able to burn the phoenix's blood was because he possessed 3 drops of pure phoenix's blood in his bloodstream. He wanted to know if there was a difference between his own phoenix flames and the phoenix flames burnt by someone whose bloodline had been passed down for countless years by the Divine Phoenix Sect. And the result had greatly disappointed him. Strictly speaking, no matter if it was the flames ignited by Yunche, or even the people from the Divine Phoenix Sect, none of them could be called phoenix flames. Rather, they were merely regular profound flames which carried a slight amount of the phoenix's divine power. Only the flames from the divine beast, the phoenix itself, were actual phoenix flames. And the purity of the phoenix's blood in one's bloodstream naturally decided the purity of one's phoenix flames as well. As one whose body carried the evil god's seed, and also the phoenix's blood, Yunche's understanding to the laws of fire, and his fire-controlling ability, could be said to be extremely strong. In an instant, he was able to feel that the purity of the phoenix flames ignited by Feng Shichen was essentially not even half of his. After all, the source of Yunche's phoenix blood came directly from the divine beast, the phoenix itself. While Feng Shichen's phoenix's bloodline was passed down generations after generations. His degree of purity was basically unable to be compared to Yunche's. The only one who possessed a bloodline whose purity could match Yunche was his ancestor of the first generation, who had received the phoenix's blood. However, the way these flames were being ignited, and their destructive laws, were exceptionally mysterious. From within them, Yunche could clearly see the shadow of the world ode of the phoenix. Back then in the phoenix's trial, using the controlling ability of his power from the evil god's fire seed, he forcefully broke through the fundamental laws of the phoenix's flames. Under the state of not possessing the phoenix profound arts, he forcefully comprehended the phoenix's profound skills, the 5th and 6th stages of the world ode of the phoenix. However, without the fundamental laws of the phoenix profound arts from the world ode of the phoenix, Yunche's phoenix flames had always been only capable of demonstrating might at the most basic level. The might of the 2 great phoenix's flame skills was similarly limited as well. While the Divine Phoenix Sect possessed the complete 1st to 4th stage of the world ode of the phoenix. If Yunche was able to receive the complete 1st to 4th stages, and have them integrate to the 5th and 6th stages, the might of his phoenix's flames would undoubtedly rise by an incomparably large amount. Within Feng Shichen's phoenix flames, Yunche tried to catch the traces of the world ode of the phoenix, however, very quickly, he gave up. After all, to inversely comprehend the profound arts from the opponent's strength was basically something seemingly impossible to achieve. Spreading his 2 arms out, the gold-colored burning phoenix flame imprint on his forehead flashed for a moment. Similar crimson-colored phoenix flames began to ignite from his body, and then, they erupted fiercely. In an instant, as though a ferocious sea monster had risen from the seas, space shook wildly, and the concentrated sounds of fabric tearing rang out. The phoenix's flames that were initially covering the entire sky, turned chaotic by the force blast in a blink of an eye, and they were even shattering into pieces, being annihilated. And what were annihilating these phoenix flames were actually the same phoenix flames that came from Yunche. However, the two had their differences. Feng Shichen's phoenix flames were like countless spiritual snakes, while Yunche's phoenix flames were like a divine dragon dominating the sky, and wherever it went, Fengshichun's phoenix flames were brutally and forcefully blasted away. What? What? This change that came so suddenly caused Fengshichun and the red and black elderly men to become greatly shocked. Yunche was swallowed by Fengshichun's phoenix's flames for nearly 5 seconds, and they had initially believed that Yunche must have already been burnt into ash. However, they had never expected that not only was Yunche not even harmed the slightest bit, his sudden outburst with his own phoenix flames could forcefully blast away Fengshichun's phoenix flames. Blasting away phoenix flames of the Divine Phoenix Prince. One should know that in the Divine Phoenix sect, the Phoenix's bloodline of the Divine Phoenix Imperial family was, comparatively, the purest. Under the same level of strength, the might of the Phoenix's flames ignited by a member of the Imperial family far surpassed any regular disciple. Fengshichun's profound strength was at the second level of the Emperor Profound Realm, however, he was completely able to face a regular Divine Phoenix sect disciple whose strength was at the 4th level of the Emperor Profound Realm without being defeated. But Yunche, whose strength was only at the 7th level of the Earth Profound Realm, with phoenix flames that came from what they termed as a bastard child's phoenix bloodline, could actually blast away Fengshichun's phoenix flames. At this moment, they looked as though they had seen ghosts under broad daylight. Also, at the same time, their souls suddenly began to surge uncontrollably. Evidently, they felt a form of pressure that came from their bloodline. And they were not entirely strangers to this form of pressure, however, this feeling of pressure that came from their bloodline clearly could only occur when one's degree of purity of their bloodline surpassed their own, and it had to even far surpass their own to be felt. However, currently, this feeling clearly came from Yunche. How was that possible? How was it possible for the bloodline of a bastard child who was living outside cause a prince who carried the royal bloodline to feel a sense of pressure? How was that possible? Fengshichun's expression stiffened. Then, it distorted slowly, bit by bit. He stared dumbfoundedly at his own phoenix flames actually being crushed by his opponent's similar phoenix flames. He felt as though his own pride and honor was severely shattered along with the phoenix flames. Gritting his teeth strongly, Fengshichun suddenly roared out loudly. His entire being rose into the air, the phoenix flame mark on his forehead intensely shone as the jade fan in his hands rained down crazed and furious hurricane-like flames. Little bastard child, this prince possesses the most honorable and valuable Divine Phoenix Imperial household's bloodline. In front of this prince, you're simply humiliating yourself with your lowly phoenix flames. This prince shall immediately allow you to witness what true phoenix flames are. The power of the Divine Phoenix. Phoenix Domain. The long cry of a phoenix cut across the skies, the flames that were initially covering the sky and earth instantly expanded by several times once again. Earlier, Fengshichun, whose heart was filled with disdain and teasing thoughts, had only used about 40% of his strength. However, this time, he used all of his strength, and even forcefully activated his current strongest destructive ability, Phoenix Domain. The flames roared out wildly and they quickly formed into a gigantic blazing phoenix, spiraling furiously above the ground, raining down a destructive power that shook the heaven and earth. The corner of Yunche's lips hooked up to a mocking arc, spreading open his 2 arms, the gold flame mark once again appeared, and a gigantic crimson-colored lotus proudly bloomed. Star-scorching demon lotus. Bang bang bang. Layers upon layers of the blazing flower, carrying a tyrannical aura that could burn away everything, bloomed at an extremely quick rate. As each layer of the blazing flower bloomed, the Phoenix Domain was forcefully and brutally torn open. That blazing phoenix, which had only just taken form, was instantly sliced into countless pieces. The dispersed flames, under the engulfment from the flames of the demon lotus, were like the white snow being shone upon by the intense rays of the sun, as they quickly dissipated into nothing. Fengshichun clearly felt his Phoenix Domain being ripped into bits like a tattered rag in the blink of an eye. In less than 10 breaths of time, he'd even lost contact with all the Phoenix flames. The Phoenix flames he viewed as pride, glory, and even life, which made him almost unparalleled amongst those at the same profound level, had actually been completely destroyed by a bastard at only the Earth Profound Realm, just like that, in the blink of an eye. The eyes of the surrounding crowd all stared as wide as bells, each and every one of them were shocked to the point of almost losing consciousness. They had all only heard rumors of Yun Che's mightiness before, single-handedly annihilated Burning Heaven clan, heavily injuring Ling Qianni. These rumors were all describing Yun Che's strength. Yet, even if there were tens of thousands more variations of such rumors, it would still be far inferior than the shock experienced from witnessing it personally. The strength erupted from Feng Shichen was the strength of a genuine emperor profound, and not only did he possess the Phoenix's bloodline, it was also the Divine Phoenix sect's imperial family's bloodline. The crowd present didn't even have the courage to estimate the mightiness of his strength. But his Phoenix flames, and even the domain he had brought out, was so easily smashed into pieces by Yun Che just like that. Even the Phoenix flames coming the Phoenix royalty was already like this in front of Yun Che, so it could be imagined just how Burning Heaven clan's profound fire had ended up. Xiao Juetian's forehead was already covered in hot sweat, his spine chilled, and cold gasps even threaded through the gaps between his teeth. When personally witnessing Yun Che's terrifying strength, he was half frightened, and half rejoiced. He rejoiced that he didn't choose to unyieldingly confront it head-on, and instead had lowered his face to compromise. Annihilating Burning Heaven clan, at most proved that Yun Che's way of doing things were vicious and extreme, but daring to pick a quarrel with Divine Phoenix Empire's prince, proved that he was unquestionably a madman who didn't take consequences into account. A madman with such terrifying strength, who didn't even fear the Divine Phoenix Empire in the slightest. Whoever provokes him would definitely be inviting their own destruction. Xiao Juetian completely firmed his decision at this moment. Even if Yun Che were to stomp the entire Xiao sect's dignity beneath his feet, he would greet him with a smile, and would never offend him even a tiny bit. Star-scorching fire continuously expanded, and quickly spread over to Feng Shichen after engulfing Feng Shichen's Phoenix domain. These flames that came from Yun Che were all flames of the Phoenix. Feng Shichen was able to recognize this point in an instant. However, while both were similarly Phoenix flames, the scorching heat and that wave of extremely overbearing pressure of the Phoenix flames coming from Yun Che actually made Feng Shichen's body and bloodline start to simultaneously tremble. His body was extremely attuned to Phoenix flames, but before Yun Che's Phoenix flames even touched his body and had only neared, his protective profound energy was already warped to a large extent, while the surface of his body more so felt the painful feeling of being scorched as if his flesh was being torn apart. At this moment, Feng Shichen's spirit had almost collapsed. Impossible. Impossible. You are only a bastard, an insignificant bastard at merely the earth-profound realm. How could you win against this prince's Phoenix bloodline? Die? The clothing on Feng Shichen's entire body puffed up as a cluster of scarlet flames ferociously burned up from his body. But before this cluster of flames had the chance to erupt, Yun Che's star-scorching flames were already flooding over like raging waves of the sea, engulfing Feng Shichen within. In just a mere 5 breaths of time, the Phoenix flame that Feng Shichen had desperately reignited was already suppressed to the point of completely extinguishing, and even his protective profound energy was also quickly melting away. Feng Shichen was instantly panic-stricken, and felt the crisis of death for the first time in his life. With a loud cry, his entire body's energy surged, and he retreated backwards with the fastest speed possible, escaping from star-scorching flames with all his might. But before he even had the time to regain his breath, Yun Che's figure had already appeared in front of him as if a ghost. With Dragon Fold having already appeared inside his hands, he directly smashed toward Feng Shichen's chest. The 2 Divine Phoenix sect black and red bodyguards were already shocked out of their wits a few times after Feng Shichen's Phoenix flames had collapsed. Seeing Feng Shichen's situation at this time, they simultaneously turned pale from fright, and violently roared, "Stop!" Within the violent roar, the 2 simultaneously rushed out like lightning, but the moment they acted, their entire bodies suddenly felt a chill, and even their movements went stiff right after. A white silhouette blurred, and Xie Qingyu blocked in front of the 2 wearing an ice veil over her face as ice spirits fluttered around her entire body. She spoke in an indifferent and cold tone, "You are going to take the advantage of numbers, and bully the young as elders." Seeing a little girl of not even 20 years old actually blocking their front, the 2 elderly roared with contempt, "Just a little girl like you, dares to block us? You court death." Before the voice fell, the red-clothed elder blasted out a palm, and sprayed out a large stretch of Phoenix flames toward Xie Qingyu, attempting to directly blow her away. However, before the Phoenix flames had even neared Xie Qingyu's body, they suddenly stalled, then quickly dissipated, and in the end had actually turned into an array of scattered ice that rained down. The minds of the black and red elderly men were both intensely quaked. They simply were unable to dare believe their own eyes. At the same time, a wave of cold energy which seemed to come from hell suddenly assaulted over, making their body instantly stiffen. As all the ice spirits danced around Xie Qingyu, the ground between the black and red elderly men suddenly bursted apart as a great tree of ice crystals bursted out from the ground and quickly grew. In the blink of an eye, countless leaves of snow and ice crystals scattered about, weaving into a dense and packed net of ice, sealing the two black and red elders within. The heaviness of the cold energy enveloping their entire bodies far surpassed the two's imaginations. They quickly ignited phoenix flames with the intention to resist, but within the branches of ice and leaves of snow, their flames quickly extinguished right after they started to burn. Some flames were even directly frozen into the most simple and purest ice crystals of energy. When ice attribute strength was strong enough, it could indeed cancel out phoenix flames. Profound fire could also be frozen, however. They had never heard that even phoenix flames could be frozen. The two locked within the branches of ice and leaves of snow struggled with all their strength, but even when joining forces, they actually couldn't escape in a short amount of time. Instead, their bodies were frozen stiffer and their blood almost solidified. Looking at the Xie Qingyu who was bathed within ice spirits like a descending goddess of ice and snow, the shock in their hearts couldn't grow any further. How was it possible for such a person to appear within the little blue wind nation whose strength was the weakest within the profound sky's 7 nations? One Yunche was already completely violating common sense, and this girl, whose age clearly wasn't much different from Yunche, was also frightening to such an extent. Could it be that in all these years, Blue Wind had always been hiding their power? The continuous shocks before their eyes caused them to uncontrollably give birth to such an absurd thought. On the other side, Yunche's dragon fault was also already smashing solidly onto Feng Shichun's body. Yunche's strongest strength was definitely not phoenix flames, but instead the heavy sword. However, Feng Shichun clearly wouldn't know about this. If he dodged with all his power, he could completely avoid Yunche's attack. However, even though he was completely thwarted by Yunche using phoenix flames, he also naively thought that Yunche's strongest part would be phoenix flames. After all, in terms of profound strength, he was only at the Earth Profound Realm. He definitely wouldn't believe that Yunche, who was only at the Earth Profound Realm, could triumph over him in terms of strength. His expression darkened, the jade fan raised up horizontally, and smashed toward Yunche's heavy sword with crazily surging profound energy. Even Ling Qianni, who was at the 6th level of the Emperor Profound Realm, who had 100 years of rich accumulation, avoided frontal confrontation with Yunche's heavy sword at all cost. Yet Feng Shichun, who was at the 2nd level of the Emperor Profound Realm, chose to confront toughness with toughness just like that. The moment Dragon Fault and the Jade Fan made contact, a cracking noise sounded, and the Jade Fan with thousands of precious fire crystals sealed within was directly smashed into pieces. Dragon Fault continued on, and smashed onto Feng Shichun's chest. Bang! Feng Shichun's protective profound energy instantly shattered explosively. At the same time, a light suddenly flashed on his body, and a phoenix cry surged up to the skies along with the light of fire. Then a detailed and complicated scarlet-colored runic markings clearly emerged on Feng Shichun's chest, then quickly vanished. Dragon Fault's ferocious energy also sharply decreased by 70% at this instant, as an enormous opposing force shook back, blasting Yunche far away. Its Divine Phoenix Sect's Emperor Profound Protective Armament, the Phoenix Treasure Tunic. Ling Yun muttered within the crowd, for this kind of Phoenix Treasure Tunic, there are only a total of 12 in the Divine Phoenix Sect. Didn't think that one of them would actually be on him. Even though the power was cancelled by 70%, Feng Shichun still felt that his chest was struck by a huge hammer that weighed at least 500,000 kilograms. Violently spraying out an arrow of blood, he flew out backwards. Fresh blood rained down in midair, and his entire chest was also bloody mutilated. The eyes of the black and red elderly men who were struggling within the tree of frozen end nearly bursted out of their sockets. They naturally knew that Feng Shichun had on the Phoenix Treasure Tunic. Protective profound strength of the Emperor Profound Realm added with the Phoenix Treasure Tunic, whose name was famous throughout Profound Sky, yet he was still smashed flying horizontally while spewing blood. They couldn't believe just how terrifying of a power was hidden behind that sword strike of Yunche's. This was that Yun Che they had never kept in their eyes at all, whom they thought had the bloodline of a bastard. How could he have such a shocking strength? What kind of a freak is this? Your Highness! Bang! The two explosively roared at the same time. Flames surged up from their entire bodies, and finally melted away all of the tree of frozen ends restraint. No longer bothering with anything else, they quickly rushed toward Feng Shichen and supported him up from the ground. Feng Shichen's gaze was already unfocused, his entire body limp. With the Phoenix treasure tunic as protection, his wounds weren't serious, but the psychological damage he took was 10,000 times stronger than the wounds on his body. He was the dignified and awe-inspiring prince of the Divine Phoenix Empire, a being that could cover the sky with one hand in the entire profound sky continent. At this little Blue Wind nation, he could walk against the law, he could even look down upon the Blue Wind Emperor, he could oppress any enormous clan at will single-handedly, no matter who it was that met him, they wouldn't dare to offend him in the slightest. When arriving in Blue Wind Empire, he should have been riding the high horse, wherever he walked to, the only things he should see were ants. Yet at this little Blue Wind nation, he was helplessly beaten down black and blue by a person who was even younger than him, lower than him in levels of profound strength, and had even mocked and called a bastard by him. It made him, who was a Divine Phoenix Prince, and even the entire Divine Phoenix Empire's face, hit rock bottom. Go! Let's go! Feng Shichen roared with his teeth clenched, without even turning back. He, who had been humiliated and lost all dignity, simply didn't have the face to stay any longer. The black and red elderly men both didn't say anything more. They simultaneously turned their heads back to take a glance at Yun Che and Xie Qingyu, and was about to leave taking Feng Shichen. Not so fast. The moment their feet had just lifted, Yun Che's icy voice suddenly came from behind, "You want to leave? Ha! Have you gotten my permission? Barging in unauthorized without invitation, not only did you destroy my great wedding hall, you've also insulted my bloodline, and even assaulted me with the intent to kill. Yet now you want to leave just like this? Do you think that my place is a playground that you can come and leave whenever you wish?" The moment Yun Che's words came out, Kang Wanhe and the others were all deeply shocked in their hearts. When Feng Shichen's group of 3 were about to leave, they had originally let out a great breath of relief, earnestly wishing that they would leave right this moment, which could be considered the best result that they didn't even dare to think about before. But unexpectedly, when they wanted to leave, Yun Che had instead wished to stop them from leaving. The black and red elderly men's footsteps stalled, and the black-colored elder turned around as he started sneering, "Yun Che, did you really think that our Divine Phoenix sect is something you can afford to provoke? Divine Phoenix sect?" Yun Che similarly started to sneer, "No matter what Divine Phoenix sect or Pheasant Demon sect you are, having provoked me, I'll make you pay a price that you'll never forget in your entire lifetime, without exception. Whether Divine Phoenix Empire is something I can afford to provoke, I do not know, and I do not need to know at the moment. Because right now, affording to provoke you 3 is already enough. You want to leave? Sure." Yun Che extended his hand, and pointed at Feng Shichen, "Leave a right arm and a right leg of his behind, then you can freely scram." Yun Che's words made the 3 people of Divine Phoenix sect, and even everyone present, all think that their ears had gone bad. The awe-inspiring Divine Phoenix sect, a supreme existence like an overlord at the profound sky continent, was actually threatened by a young man from the little nation like the Blue Wind to leave behind a hand and a foot, let alone seeing or hearing this before. No one had even dared to ever imagine it. As the Emperor of Blue Wind, Kang Wanhe had experienced countless up and downs in his entire life, and had even gone through calamities of life and death, but upon hearing these words, his heart was shocked to the point of spasming then and there. The hairs on the 3 from Divine Phoenix sect were even more erect, firelight surged everywhere as their entire heads nearly bursted from anger. The red-clothed elderly man pointed at Yun Che, and said with a voice furious to the utmost limit, "Insolent Junior. You actually dare threaten my Divine Phoenix Empire's prince? His Highness is our Divine Phoenix sect's, as well as the Divine Phoenix Empire's 13th prince. I dare you to harm one hair on His Highness' head." Kang Wanhe's head was already full of steaming sweat. Just as he moved forward a few steps and was about to speak, he heard Yun Che's cold laugh, "You think I don't dare? Heh? Then I'll personally do the harm for you to see. Before his voice fell, Yun-Che had already dashed out. Sweeping up an enormous profound energy storm, Dragon Fault smashed toward the three along with a soul-shaking dragon cry. Xia Qingyue's fine brows slightly moved, as her figure floated up. There were three opponents, one at the second level of the Emperor Profound Realm, and two at the third level of the Emperor Profound Realm who all possessed the bloodline of Phoenix. She was afraid that it might be somewhat strained for Yun-Che to face against alone. But before she could even speak, Yun-Che's explosive roar had already resounded throughout the entire audience. No one's allowed to interfere. Xia Qingyue's figure stalled, and after slightly pondering for a bit, the movements of her hand instantly change. Following the fluttering of her arm and the ice spirits, two huge transparent ice walls were conjured from the under the ground and spread outwards with an extremely quick speed, sealing off the left and right side of Yun-Che and the three people of Divine Phoenix sect, preventing their battle's residual energy from harming the surrounding people. Even though it had only been a little more than 2 months, Xia Qingyue's frozen end divine arts had clearly gone through another breakthrough. The two black and red elders were now absolutely sure that this Yun-Che before their eyes was simply a madman. The immensely vast threat of their Divine Phoenix Empire actually didn't have the slightest effect in front of him. In this profound sky continent, only a madman would treat their Divine Phoenix Empire like nothing. And only a madman would so unhesitatingly attack a real prince from the Divine Phoenix sect without holding back. Junior, you court death. The two were both burning with extreme anger. The black-cloaked elderly man took a step forward as a pitch-black long spear instantly solidified within his hand. Flames on the spear's body surged up, as though it was a twisting snake of flames. The black-cloaked elderly man's figure frenziedly rushed out as fast as lightning, the spear tip directly piercing toward the vitals of Yun-Che's chest as his body carried blurry after-images and a scarlet flame trail. The sharp sound of air exploding mixed with ear-piercing phoenix cries, almost piercing through the crowd's eardrums. Yun-Che's expression remained unchanged. His momentum unabated, his gaze as cold as ice. The heavy sword storm that was already extremely ferocious suddenly surged up with scarlet-colored phoenix flames. Though this wave of energy storm wasn't sharp, it was oppressive and soul-shaking like rolling thunder crashing onto the ground. When they were less than 5 feet away from each other, the black-cloaked elderly man clearly felt the terror of that energy storm coming from Yun-Che. He also instantly understood why Feng Shichen, who had the phoenix treasure tunic on his body, still received heavy injuries from a single sword strike. After the shock beneath his heart ended, he no longer had time to shift positions, and could only brace himself to meet it head-on. Boom! The phoenix flames on the spear's body was directly suppressed to the point of completely extinguishing by the heavy sword's power. The thick and long spear body also arched to a great degree by the impact, nearly snapping apart. The red-clothed elder behind him was greatly dismayed. He knew the might behind this spear strike by the black-clothed elderly man. He had also seen Yun-Che's shocking strength, but he never had expected that Yun-Che could so easily break the black-clothed elderly man's killing move. Dragon Fault's power slightly stalled for a bit under the collision, while the phoenix flames erupted at this time, flooding toward the black-clothed elderly man. The black-clothed elder's pupils constricted, and his body pulled back with an extremely fast speed. Clenching his teeth, he let out a loud roar, directly throwing away the spear in his hands as his entire body instantly burned up with extremely thick and dense flames. The surrounding air warped to a great extent, even the ground beneath was completely burned into a red color, as if the black-clothed elderly man's entire being was bathing within fresh blood. Ha! Firelight as thick as blood instantly exploded, scattering into flame-shaped snakes as vicious as lightning, and rushed ahead. Rip! Rip! SSSS! The blood-colored firelight obstructed Yun-Che's phoenix flames, scattering it piece by piece. If this was merely and purely Yun-Che's phoenix flames, there was indeed the possibility of it to be completely cancelled out. But what accompanied the phoenix flames was still the overbearing heavy sword storm. The heavy sword storm behind it instantly flooded over at the next instant, bringing along the phoenix flames. In the blink of an eye, it engulfed and broke through the extremely high-density blood-colored flames like an unconquerable colossal serpent. Then, in the reflections of the black-cloaked elderly man's pupils, it violently crashed onto his chest, easily ripping apart his protective profound energy, broke into his body, and rushed into his meridians. The black-clothed elderly man's complexion instantly turned pale, his body consecutively fell back over a dozen steps, his limbs trembled as all the orifices on his face bled. His entire shirt was also completely burnt into ashes, and the exposed skin had been mostly scorched black as well. It was simply too miserable to speak of. The entire audience was in complete dead silence. Not only Feng Shichen, even the two elders of the bodyguard level in the Divine Phoenix sect had been smashed injured by Yun Che in less than 3 exchanges. Moreover, the injuries were considerably heavy. Yun Che's strength was evidently much more terrifying than the rumors. The crowd was already incapable of imagining where the exact limit of his strength was. Back then, at the Blue Fire region, Yun Che's profound strength broke through to the 7th level of the Earth Profound Realm, but he had only broken through that time, and had not stabilized yet. After 2 months had passed, Yun Che's basic profound strength at the 7th level of the Earth Profound Realm was already extraordinarily stable, and had also started to step into the later stages. In addition to the fact that he still consumed dragon flesh as food every day in this period of time, his constitution also grew immensely. His current overall power had surpassed the power he had when battling Ling Qianli to a large degree. If Ling Qianli was to fight with him again right now, he would definitely be shocked about the speed of his growth. And such a growth was even under the condition that his profound strength rank hadn't increased. The black-clothed elderly man's old face had already turned into the color of pig liver. Being injured was secondary, but he, who was a dignified Divine Phoenix sect bodyguard, was actually wounded by a junior of a little blue wind nation in 3 moves. This was even under the gazes of everyone present. As a lofty and superior Divine Phoenix sect bodyguard, face was unquestionably more important than life. As of today, that old face of his could be considered as having been stepped on beneath someone's feet. As he covered his chest, the black-clothed elderly man's entire body shivered, while the red-clothed elderly man beside him also had an extremely darkened expression. However, Yun Che didn't have the slightest hint of stopping, and directly rushed up dragging his heavy sword once again. Phoenix flame searing heaven. Against such a frightening heavy pressure, the black-clothed elderly man and the red-clothed elderly man could not bother with something like face anymore as the two simultaneously struck out. Waves of fire instantaneously billowed to the skies, even the space itself was nearly burnt open. 2 great Emperor Profound bodyguards of the Divine Phoenix Empire attacking at full strength together, how mighty of a power that was. Even though they were separated by Xie Qingyue's ice wall, the profound practitioners present still felt their entire bodies' blood and breath boil. Their hearts almost jumping out of their bodies as their entire body felt unspeakably uncomfortable. They all had no choice but to construct protective profound energy on themselves with all their strength. So scary. These two are clearly truly enraged. They are people of Divine Phoenix sect, and even are people by the prince's side. Just the imposing air was already so terrifying, if met head-on, it's simply unimaginable. Even if it's Yun Che, he shouldn't be able to resist against it at all, right? However, 2 great Divine Phoenix sect bodyguards were actually jointly attacking a junior who wasn't even 1/4 their age. Not to mention the surrounding people, even they themselves felt their faces turn hot. But the mightiness of Yun Che's strength had entirely surpassed their expectations, and only by completely killing him here would they be able to take back some face. Yet when facing against the full power attack by 2 great Emperor Profounds of the Divine Phoenix Empire, Yun Che's expression didn't change in the slightest. On Dragon Fault, the heavy sword's power roared as it fused with Phoenix flames, and a matchless enormous energy locked onto the black and red elders before crazily erupting. Boom! The collision between Phoenix flames and Phoenix flames instantly caused space to burst open, Phoenix cries, rumbling sounds, air exploding and sound of space tearing chaotically resounded in midair. That extremely blinding firelight and profound energy radiance almost blotted out the sun's brilliance from above. The immensely blinding light of flames and the huge rumbling noise caused the surrounding crowd to instantly lose their sight and hearing. The power of the flames ruthlessly swept through, the ground was flipped up over 10 meters high, the walls of frozen Xie Qingyu had constructed with full power swayed. Then, cracks quickly crawled all over the place as slivers of the profound energy storm seeped through these tiny cracks. But just these tiny portions of leaked energy had already blasted away the nearby profound practitioners in an instant, while some people whose profound strength was relatively weaker vomited blood on the spot. The spectating crowd instantly went into chaos. The sky-reaching light of the phoenix flames lasted for a dozen breaths of time, and finally began to dissipate. Everyone's eyesights had also cleared at this moment, and through the transparent wall of ice that had almost fully bursted apart, they saw that the black and red elders were completely scorched black. From clothing to hair, they had all been burnt to charcoal, and the place they stood was over 100 meters away from their original position. However, when looking back at Yun-Che, there wasn't a single hint of injury on his body, even his clothing and hair wasn't messy in the slightest. This scene made everyone gasp deeply. Over half of them were directly struck dumb, still unable to believe their own eyes for quite a while. Yun-Che alone, with one sword strike, had smashed back 2 great Emperor Profounds from the Divine Phoenix Empire without being harmed at all. Yun-Che's dragon fault dragged onto the ground, and a faint smile hung on the corner of his mouth. His gaze was profound yet calm, the tips of his hair wantonly fluttered amidst the gust of profound energy that hadn't fully dissipated. At this moment, Yun-Che was like an emperor that looked down upon the world in everyone's eyes. This kind of aura and imposing force had even surpassed the Blue Wind Emperor, Kang Wanhe, who had been on the throne for several tens of years. The lips of the black and red elderly men trembled, and fear had even emerged in the expression of their eyes. When jointly attacking earlier, they had not held back in the slightest and attacked with complete, full power. Yet the two were still beaten back after joining hands. They were already so frightened that their hearts were about to burst open. In this small blue wind nation, how could there exist such a being? Ha! The corner of Yun-Che's lips slightly slanted as a faint laugh seeped out from his lips. Suddenly, his figure blurred, and an after-image took off as his entire person directly rushed toward Feng Shichen. Within that exchange earlier, Feng Shichen was undoubtedly affected. The state of his injuries that wasn't light from the start became even heavier, and now he was heavily breathing while half-kneeling onto the floor. Don't! The 2 black and red elders turned pale with fright. Now, not only had they already affirmed that Yun-Che was simply a madman who took no heed of consequences when doing things, they've also affirmed that he was a terrifying madman. Such a madman would do anything that was possible. Perhaps he would really strike to kill Feng Shichen. If the 13th prince were to really die here, then they wouldn't be able to atone for their crime even if they were to die 10,000 times. Their families would even be implicated. Yun-Che's sudden actions made the two feel that their hearts were about to burst. They uttered a loud roar as strength from their entire body crazily flooded out. Dragon rupturing flame. The two's power fused together and compressed down to the utmost limit, blasting out a stroke of extremely dense phoenix flames that flew toward Yun-Che amidst the howling sound that shook the heavens. Yun-Che's eyelids lifted as the heavy sword swung out, a wolf image rushed out within the howling of the wind. Sky Wolf slash. Boom boom. The noise of air exploding disorderly sounded, the phoenix's flame and the Sky Wolf's power fiercely clashed, engulfing and tearing each other apart. But this kind of stalemate did not last very long. With the sounding of a ferocious wolf's roar, the phoenix flames were pierced through by the Sky Wolf's image, and torn up into 2. The Sky Wolf's image continued howling forward, crashing onto the bodies of 2 black and red elders. Though nearly 70% of the Sky Wolf's power had been shaved off by the phoenix flames, the remaining energy was still incomparably terrifying. The two's protective profound energy were instantly shattered from impact, and the skin and flesh of their chests turned over. Blood splattered everywhere and their bodies were also blasted over 30 meters away, unable to stand up for a long time. Yun-Che had already rushed to the front of Feng Shichen, and knocked him over with a kick. His body made a rotation in midair, then heavily plummeted down. And the spot his right foot was landing for, just happened to be Feng Shichen's head. Boom! This time, Yun-Che didn't control Dragon Fault's weight, and freely fell down from above. Dragon Fault's heavy weight of over 20,000 kilograms instantly bursted the ground apart. Feng Shichen's entire head had also been completely stomped into the ground by Yun-Che, and not even a strand of hair was revealed to the outside. Episode 54 is end here. Next episode coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.